Hello to all my subscribers on Substack, my paid and unpaid subscribers, and to fellow travelers across social media, across emails, across just reading me through Al Jazeera, through Spinning Sage's Gold, through Boy At the Window, through even Fear of a Black America from way back when, and everything in between. This is Donald Earl Collins coming to you on ostensibly my 56th birthday. I'm recording this a few hours before it, but essentially by the time you'll see it, I'll be 56. Knock on wood. So here we are. Hi everyone. I want to talk to you about a couple of things. Hopefully you're seeing this recording the way I want you to see it, which includes me sharing my screen about a Medium piece I wrote about 7.5, 8 years ago, but I actually started working on it more like 9 years ago, thinking through things that I had like rediscovered about my past through repressed memories and some therapy, among other things, about what happened to me when I was 6.5 years old in terms of sexual assault on a playground by a bunch of teenagers. But I don't really want to spend a lot of time on that because I've written articles about that. I've spent part of my time outside of the context of my Substack, Fool's Gold, Confessions from an Educated Fool, talking about these themes. So I don't really want to reiterate this. I don't want to hammer it home over and over again. But I do want to talk about this because it is 50 years ago. And the calendar that we're in this year is the same calendar as it was in 2003 and 2014. Will be in 2031, actually, in 1986, in 1975, and in 1969, as it turns out, which is the year I was born. So Saturday, December the 27th, is exactly 56 years since the day I was born. So it's just kind of funny thinking about that, and thinking about that really this 4-day extended weekend between Christmas, my birthday 2 days after Christmas, and then that period roughly between about December the 24th through about December the 29th essentially were the best 5 days of my entire childhood. To think about that for a second, that was 50 years ago, right? You know, more than probably 2 feet and 200 about 200 pounds later, than what I looked like way back then. So, but anyway, main thing I bring up is that one of the gifts I got that Christmas was a big wheel, right? And big wheels were big deals in the late 60s and early 70s. They just were, right? They were like buying a new Xbox or getting Grand Theft Auto or Fallout or some other thing that might have been the latest craze, right? Getting your hands on an Apple Watch or the latest iPhone 17 or something along those lines. That was a big deal. And my mom went all out this particular Christmas, right? She, for whatever reason, decided to get us whatever we wanted. So we ended up with Tonka trucks, right? We only had a couple up to this point. We had dump trucks. These were a big deal, especially for boys. Even though I knew some girls who liked these trucks too, right? This is a big deal. We got some inflatable boxing thingies, right, that were sort of oval and yet kind of square at the same time. I don't even remember what they're called anymore. They were a fad in 1974, 75, 76. The Slinky, which had been a fad for years, we finally got a Slinky that we could throw down the steps and then would just go down the steps, amongst so many other things. No one told me that that this was basically going to be the best that my childhood was going to be. And in the following months, 18 months, it turned out that it wasn't going to be because of what happened to me in July of 76, which is why this Medium piece is up on screen for you to see, not for you. I mean, if you want to read it, be my guest. It's on Medium. You know my name. Shouldn't be that hard to find when I'm talking about Junot Diaz at the same time I'm talking about my big wheel excursion. But thinking about that, and 50 years later, having published your third book, and yeah, it's self-published and blah blah blah. That I don't want to hear all that BS about. Well, it's not a real book. It's a real book, and it has real blurbs from real authors and had been reviewed and looked at by real editors and real people. I just decided to publish it this way, as I told you back in April. So for various reasons. So I bring all that up to say that even though my childhood was pretty terrible from any sort of objective standpoint, particularly after 1975, up until I grew up and went off to college, I have things to be thankful for. Lots of things, right? This is even with the relative unemployment of not having full time gigs the way I'm used to. I have made more as a writer and been able to generate more as a writer this year than I pretty much have ever been able to do. Partly out of the need to make money and to be able to pay some bills and to eat and pay rent and those kinds of things, but also partly because I really wanted to ramp up after I left Loyola last year, and after the AU thing with American University started winding down this past year as well. So I needed to step up, and I wanted to step up. So the combination means I've been very prolific compared to even what I was doing even 2 or 3 years ago. So that's good. Now, if I can only gear this up for the completely or at least significantly replace full-time work, that would be great. Otherwise, I'm probably going to be driving Uber and doing other things this coming year in addition to writing and doing the Substack. But that's a whole nother story. That's the Confessions from an Educated Fool side of things, right? Where I don't have things to be thankful for. And in point of fact, like many of you probably have reasons to be angry about the toxicity of the American workplace and toxicity of trying to find employment in a capitalist society where increasingly we're trying, the powers that are trying to turn us into basically the equivalent of the Matrix's human battery cogs in their big machine, screwing us over left, right, and center. So there's that. But still, I am thankful because there's no way that this book could have been has done as well as it has up to this point, even with limited royalties and some limited coverage, without help, without people saying, okay, I'll buy a copy, okay, I'll review it, okay, I'll give you a blurb, okay, I'll have you on and talk to you about your book and talk to you about the themes that are in your book and even publish an article about. All that's happened in the last 6 months, and I am grateful. So I just want to read the acknowledgement section that I finally put into the second edition of the book that came out last week. Anybody that's, looked at the first edition knows I don't have an acknowledgement section in there. And I didn't put it in for one very specific reason. I wanted to see what people would do once I put the book out, right? I would eventually have put one in there about the people who looked at it before I actually geared up and finally put the book out in June. So I wanted to see what would happen once that happened, and lots happened. So I wanted to thank those folks. So I'm going to read it to you. No matter how much occurs in one's mind, I'm used to clapping after I make a mistake from reading, by the way, from months of doing audio work, so I won't be doing too much of that. Let me stop myself. No matter how much of it occurs in one's mind, no matter how much of the work is between one's fingers on a keyboard and the blank white word processing screen, any serious writing project requires the help of community, no matter the size. Spinning Sage's Gold has been no different. When this book idea was but a couple of rejected academic pieces on American narcissism and racism 9 years ago, it took numerous leaps in logic. It took numerous leaps in both logic and faith for the idea to evolve into a mixed genre book. It all started with the old crew of 7 scribes. This is a place that no longer exists, even though their website's still up. Van Newkirk's baby. He's a senior editor with The Atlantic now. I think he has his own podcast, among other things. They published my piece, Affirmative Whiteness, about the narcissism of those who believe the lie of reverse racism in white-dominated spaces. Folks like Edward Blum and Abigail Fisher, Becky with the bad grades, as Beyonce called her back in 2015, right? The latter lost her second bid for redress in the U.S. Supreme Court of June 2016, a temporary reprieve, as it turned out, as we all know. Still, Brilliant young black writers Eve Ewing, Josie Duffy Rice, and Van Newkirk saw promise in my middle-aged attempt to write about the social psychology of it all and helped me turn meh level work into something akin to accessible. To Eve, Josie, and Van, thanks for giving me a boost at a time when I really needed it as a struggling writer. Only my wife knows this. No, I told no. I've never told anyone else this. I was, but by the time they contacted me in June of 2016 to tell me they wanted to publish this article and to help me do all these revisions to it, I was about 2 months away from just giving up doing writing. Period. Not just academic writing. I mean all writing. Right? And I'd banged my head against so many doors and dealt with so many people who were just automatically saying no, or they dealt with me in a very sort of terse way, right? I'd send you a piece, and then all of a sudden I get an email saying, do these revisions. You need to overhaul this. You need to do that. I'm like, but you haven't told me whether you want to publish my piece or not, right? It would be that terse and that blunt, and I wouldn't know what to do. And after a couple of years of almost articles or articles I published I wasn't even satisfied with, for academic pieces that I worked on for 2-3 years, only get rejected at the editor stage, I said, why in the fuck am I still doing this? Maybe I should just do something entirely different. I was seriously considering just leaving academia and working at Costco or Trader Joe's, and I would have been perfectly okay with it to the extent that I could provide for my family without bumping heads against brick walls all the time. But as it turned out, this group saw my work and said, okay, fine. And then a year later is this. The turn to full-fledged freelance writing for global audiences on the U.S. and the West and their long history of narcissism and racism came after I began to pitch and publish essays with Al Jazeera English in 2017. Opinion editors Maria Petkova and Berger Boer have been wonderful to work with over these past 9 years. They provided for me the platform I needed to test out my main ideas about the past, the present, and future of a Western-dominated world, and what it may well take to overcome it. Hope you know how much I appreciate you both. They basically saved me as a writer. It's no exaggeration to say that, in between the Seven Scribes thing and the Al Jazeera thing, there's also other articles. I mean, I wrote an article for the Land, but I would have been doing an article here or 3 articles there, getting paid somewhat and not getting paid. Someone Huffington Post didn't pay me for any of the pieces I did for them at the end of 2016, beginning of 2017, for example. Medium sometimes paid me simply to boost my articles, right? In 2016, 2017, 2018, before that model started falling apart. So Al Jazeera coming along and going, hey, we like what you're doing about the U.S. and about the West. We like these weird, off-centered, not everyone's talking about the same thing all the time kind of articles. So they went ahead and did that. And so Spinning Sage's Gold could not be without these essays that I started writing for Al Jazeera in 2017 and really helping me evolve the idea into something that's more allegorical with a lot of non-fictional from the essays I wrote for Al Jazeera, right? There are other essays I wrote that weren't for Al Jazeera, but the ones that published, almost all of them are Al Jazeera, with the exception of Seven Scribes piece and a couple of other ones. So definitely thanks. I needed some serious help to evolve this book from a series of essays and op-eds to allegory, especially since outside of my notes from a boy at the window blog, my creative writing experience was, well, very rough. It was. Even tried taking a creative nonfiction writing classes my last year at the University of Pittsburgh in 1990 and 91, and I couldn't even get into a class. No matter how early I registered, both semesters I registered early, I still couldn't get into these classes. So I've had to pick this up over time. But poets and authors like Jacqueline Johnson, some former coworker who is a really good quilter who can tell stories through quilts and has been doing it for years, up in Brooklyn, New York, where she is. I love you, Jacqueline. I really do. Sandaria Faye, whose book Mourner's Bench I did read, and it was an inspiration. I read it years after she published it in 2014, right? Read it about 3-4 years ago, so there's that. And Leda Han Fincher, whose books on feminism in China and repression in China, really are great journalistic reads. They're just beautifully written essays. But she deals so hard with the nonfiction, with the idea of allegory kind of stunned her, right? But she still read it. She still read my initial drafts, right? She helped me, they all helped me settle on a path between the real and the possible, yet somewhat out of reach. Other encouragement has come from unexpected ways and unanticipated moments, right? And these are people who actually follow or read my stuff here on Substack. To writers Tracy McWhorter, Disha Filial, and Robert Jones Jr., once known as Son of Baldwin, thanks for pumping my work, for reading excerpts of Spinning Sage's Gold on my Fool's Gold Confessions from an Educated Fool Substack, for a kind word or email over the past 6 years. It helps to have writers say, "You're doing a good job. Keep doing it. I love this piece. Keep writing like this. Here's a little bit of cash. Just help you like round out this Substack among other things." So truly, thank you. To my dear friends from my other fields in academia, from the nonprofit or NGO world, Adria Gallup Black and Catherine Lugg, though y'all may not have understood what I was doing when I decided on meshing the allegorical with the nonfictional in 2019, you both continue to keep up with my work and the methods of my sword of madness. To them and to Maria McWhorter, who gave me the idea of doing an audiobook, and I kind of wish you hadn't, because I didn't realize I spent 370 something hours working on this. But anyway, right? Many thanks for continuing to check in with me and my work. To American University folks, especially Professor and playwright Sybil Williams, or Sybil R. Williams, and my former students Eric Brock, Tricia Day, and Lauren Seals, thanks for being the first readers of the initially completed manuscript in 2021. They were. I asked them to read it during Christmas break between 2020 and 2021 when 100,000 people a month were dying from COVID. And they, in their infinite wisdom, decided, sure, I'll read what you got. Whatever, Professor, or whatever, Donald, or whatever. It was kind of funny. And they read it. They all gave me some feedback, some way more than others. I mean, Sybil gave me like 4 pages worth of extensive feedback. Very helpful feedback. Eric, as a student, Community loved everything I wrote, but he definitely gave me a lot of feedback. Tricia gave me a lot of feedback. Laura didn't give me much feedback, but she at least told me what she did read, what she did understand, and what she didn't understand, which is important to know as a writer, right? But their feedback and critiques helped me recognize I had a book very much worth reading. Thanks for going the extra mile to help an itinerant minister of higher education see the value of his own work. I must give genuine appreciation to those who have supported Spinning Sage's Gold for no reason in particular, except that they too saw the worth of my ideas in an allegory about black and brown women inheriting the world above all else. To David Whetstone, thanks so much for having me on We the People to hash out my ideas on radio in detail. I simply wouldn't have had the confidence to write this book without knowing there is an audience hungry for new ways of sensing in this world. And he had me on twice. Once in 2018 when this book was just basically a few published essays in Al Jazeera, right? And some idea about, well, I can't just republish all these essays as is. I need to do a little bit more. And, I hadn't even involved the idea of allegory very seriously yet. I was just sort of playing around with it. So he had me on 2018. I even took questions from audiences, which was great because I got to play around with these ideas about American narcissism and racism. Where does that leave the U.S. and where does that leave the West in terms of the road that we're still on, unfortunately, right? And then again, just a few months ago, after the book came out, he decided to have me on. I'm like, I haven't sold but a few copies yet, but here we are, and here I am talking for a full hour, to not a small audience about my book, which was great, so thank you. And to authors Anjali Anjeti, Basi Ikpi, and Stephen Salita, each of you are as true to your words in the real world as you are on paper and in social media. You are all awesome people and have been through it just like I have. It means so much for you all to have helped me put this book into the world. So their blurbs are obviously going to help. Thank you. I'm trying not to get too emotional about it, but thank you. To my wife, Angela, and son, Noah, your love and your belief in me and my talent as a writer means everything. I simply could not be the person, the educator, the thinker, and the author I am without both of you as muses in my life and heart. Thank you is just so inadequate to capture how much I believe in and love you both. To God, God, gods, the universe, the stars in the visible spectrum of the human eye that some wish upon, and to my ancestors, and maybe even descendants, genetic and spiritual. Thanks for the dreams, the nightmares, and the visions over the decades. You are more than any of us can imagine on our own. And I say all of that to say that who knows? This book might well take off, continue to take off. Maybe it'll be 25 years before I sell my 1,000th copy on the other hand, right? Maybe it won't ever do as well as I hope that it will do. But you know what? It is what it is. And thank you. Thank you all for being part of this. I hope that we can continue to build on what I've done this year into 2026. And to see more of you reading and commenting and giving me feedback on what you've read, what you've heard, where do you like the audiobook, where do you like the ebook, where do you like the paperback, where do you like what are the content of what I write, where do you like me doing voiceovers and trying to do character voices and things of that nature. Hearing from you about all that and more as I continue to talk about this book and pivot toward doing more Confessions from an Educated Fool type things about the workplace. So, happy holidays. I know a lot of us struggle this time of year, and more so in a dystopian present that includes genocide happening in various parts of the world and a massive crackdown on freedoms here at home in the U.S. But it is what it is, and so you try to make the best of it. People smiling and laughing in the worst of circumstances. I know I have. So I wish you all joy and laughter despite it all and because of what we face in this time.